Well, let's start with yesterday, the Texas Association of Business Board voted to support the American Airlines US Air merger, which, of course, the current Attorney General has joined with the feds in opposing. Now, I was just wondering, if you were the Attorney General, would you take the position Abbott has taken, or would you stand with Wendy Davis in her support for the merger? And maybe we'll start at the end there, Chairman Smitherman.
I love the way you set that up, Reeve.
Yes.
Thank you. And again, thanks to everyone for being here. The last time we were together was during the Texas A&M Alabama game, so I didn't get to see any of the game, and I'm pleased that they're not playing at the moment. In terms of that particular case, I've already talked with the Dallas Chamber of Commerce and several leaders in Dallas that merger should go through. It's always a problem when government inserts itself into a commercial endeavor. And that's what we have. We have a joining together of two companies, each of which has determined that this is the best model for them going forward. It's the best association. Dallas and North Texas will prosper because of it. And if American Airlines, the surviving airline after the merger, does not provide good service, you can go catch Southwest Airlines at Love Field. So we need to always be very careful before government inserts itself into a private arrangement, and in that case, I would not have gotten involved and not tried to prohibit them from joining together privately.
Senator Paxton?
I think he just took the side of Wendy Davis. Well, what I'm going to say is I approach issues from a framework, and the framework usually is less government intervention, free markets, let business operate with as little regulation as possible. There may be things about this particular issue that are confidential and proprietary that General Abbott knows that we don't know. But just in general, I would not insert myself into these type of issues just because I really believe that businesses will make the right decisions. The consumers have the opportunity to make the right decisions. And that's the system that's worked in Texas. That's the system that's worked in this country for years. And so I'm all about the free market and letting business operate as free from government intervention as possible.
Chairman Branch?
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm running is to help preserve our limited government heritage here. So I'll take the general. The general's been an outstanding attorney general, and he's fought the Obama administration a lot, a legacy I hope to continue, given the current administration, which has been sort of very tough on states' rights, individual rights, is overreaching in my view. But in this case, I take the general at his word. He came to Dallas recently, addressed the issue, said that the state of the law is such on antitrust that he felt compelled to get in. He also said very quickly that he's working, his people from his office are working daily with American Airlines, trying to get a quick resolution. It's also my understanding that the other states, Arizona, Virginia, that are involved, are in a position so they can negotiate for their particular interests, and they can do that separately from the federal government. So I hope that we have a quick resolution. As someone who is from North Texas, it's very important to our economy, the DFW Airport and American Airlines. Their continued recovery is really important, and those jobs and keeping the headquarters of what would be the world's largest airline in Texas is very important. So I hope we do get a quick resolution and we're allowed the merger's allowed to move forward.
Well, I think other than on that one issue, Commissioner, that all of you have praised General Abbott in his time in office and said you'd like to sort of continue on his legacy. But obviously he's been there for 10 years. So surely there must be somewhere where maybe you disagree or sort of where he might have went wrong. What would you do differently? Maybe I'll start with Senator Paxton on this one. What would you do differently than General Abbott?
You know, Reeve, I get asked all the time, how are you going to step into such big shoes? And I say, I agree, they are big shoes, but what he's done is he's created a momentum, a good momentum for our state. And I'd much rather step into a job where things have gone in the right direction and there's a good momentum. So I appreciate what he's done. You know, I come at this from a little different perspective. He was on the Supreme Court and he was a justice. He comes at it from a little different angle. I come from a more legislative angle. I've been in the House and the Senate. And so, you know, I'm sure that there'll be different issues that I'll approach differently. So I think I don't have specific issues that I differ with him on. I think he's done a great job, but I will say that there's no doubt, and we don't know what issues are going to come up. We all think we do. We talk about the ones that exist, but we don't know what issues are going to come up, and so it's difficult to say how we would react to those particular issues. I'm sure that there will be issues that we would have some differences just because of the reference point that we come from.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure to be a petitioner on 7 of these lawsuits against the EPA. We currently have 18 live lawsuits against the federal government. It was 30. We winnowed it down to 18. And General Abbott has done a great job pushing back on the federal government because they are putting forward rulemakings that would harm our economy. They're not grounded in science. They're driven to some degree by politics of various kinds, including green energy politics. So as the next Attorney General, I will carry through with those 7 lawsuits that I'm presently involved in. I also will make prosecuting border crime a high priority. As a former prosecutor in the Harris County DA's office, I know that the Attorney General can work with local prosecutors to go after just plain vanilla crime, assault, DWI, trespass, theft, any kind of crime that happens that's already on the books. The Attorney General's office can provide expertise, can take over a case if requested to do so, and that will be a high priority for me. I'd say the last thing is, having been now chairman of the Railroad Commission, a big and important state agency with about 725 employees, PUC about 200 employees, coming to the Attorney General's office, which has 4,200 employees and a $500 million budget, needs someone with leadership experience, someone who has run a state agency and made it perform better than when I got there using less taxpayer dollars. General Abbott's done a great job over the last 12 years, but any organization needs from time to time to have a fresh look at it, to make sure that it's spending taxpayer dollars in the right way and that we have the right focus on the right types of activities.
And Chairman Branch, is there any way you would have differed with Abbott? And also, maybe added that, obviously, Commissioner Smitherman was talking about his experience in legislature. What does legislative experience bring to this position also? Maybe Paxton can join in on that afterwards.
Well, I'd say that obviously General Abbott's been a very strong, aggressive, tough Attorney General, and he stood up to the federal government. My sense is that we're going to have new circumstances, as was mentioned, that issues come up that you don't necessarily anticipate. So you got to look at a framework. But I think we would have a similar style of, holding the federal government accountable for its role as the national government. You also have responsibilities, in my view, real important to keep open and transparent government here in Texas, to preserve appropriate levels of regulation in your Attorney General process. But I'd say making sure the federal government doesn't overreach on the rights of Texans, and making sure the federal government, as the national government, steps up and does its job, like securing an international border or securing water for our state in an international treaty. So the national government has a role, and the Attorney General has an important job to make sure he defends Texans. And perhaps that's why all the senior leadership of General Abbott, all those who've left his administration that he hired to fight Obama, have all endorsed our message and my candidacy. So it's been that's been a shot in the arm to our campaign to have all of his leadership come on board. And so I think that that's a sign that we have a similar approach to the office, but different issues will come up. And you said, I come at it from not only being a legislator. I started my practice in the highest, arguably the highest court in the state, working for the Chief Justice of the Texas Supreme Court. And then I was in the private sector practicing law. I've been practicing law for 30 years in a big firm setting. Started my own law firm, built it up, transitioned it into one of the largest law firms in the state. So I've got experience from the private sector. General Abbott spent a lengthy time as a judge. And I've spent time in the legislature getting things done, passing, not only being a conservative, but actually getting conservative things accomplished. And so that will, to me, follow me into the office, and I'll have an insight into the legislative process that perhaps someone who'd been in the judicial branch most of their life wouldn't have.
And Senator Paxton, you want to say anything about
Yeah, Reeve.
being a legislator?
I don't know if my mic, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay,
You might
good.
have to shout for the other people.
What I was going to say is, you know this, as General Abbott did not come from a government agency to step into this job. He came from the Supreme Court. I've been in the private sector along with being in the legislature. I think the private sector is a valuable place to come from, just to see how things work outside of the government sector. So I consider that valuable experience, as well as my 11-year track record in the legislature. It's one of the frustrations that a lot of conservatives have when they're voting is they hear good rhetoric during the campaign, but then they end up having people come into office that don't back that rhetoric up with a record. And that's one thing that I'm offering the voters, I think, that is unique and consistent. My record has not gone up and down over 11 years. It's been conservative throughout the 11 years, both on fiscal and social issues. And it's just nice. I know as a voter, it's nice to know that you can count on that. And I think the second thing that I always look at is courage. I mean, that's why I think Ronald Reagan was so beloved. He was not afraid to say no. He said "niet" to the Soviet Union. And he said trust but verify. He was not afraid to stand up. And we've all watched Ted Cruz and what he's done in the last couple of days. And I think people appreciate somebody that steps into the role and does what they said they were going to do and stands up and says no, not just to Obama. It's easy to say no to Obama, but also sometimes, as he's doing, standing up to your own party and saying, look, this is not the right direction. And being willing to stand up, even though you're new, being willing to stand up to a party leadership that's been around a long time. I think people appreciate that. I know that I do. And I think I've offered some of that same courage in standing up to my party, whether it's votes on the budget, which are tough to take against your own party, whether it's votes against the franchise tax, or frankly, whether it's running against the speaker when you feel that the speaker should be elected by a Republican caucus and not mostly Democrats. So I think those are important.
Well, speaking of Ted Cruz, is there anything that the Attorney General of Texas can do at this point to fight Obamacare, as I think all three of you have indicated that you're eager to do? Or is that just campaign rhetoric, or is there actually something substantive that the Attorney General's office can do?
Yeah, I think there is. There's a Medicaid fraud division. It's a growing area. I think we're a big consumer of medical services, a big state, approaching 27 million. We have this new monstrosity coming down the pike, in my view. Obviously, we have to uphold the law of the land. The Congress has its job to do. They're fighting that out, resolve that issue. Senator Cruz was obviously someone who stood up and feels passionately about the issue, and as do I. And in fact, we're fortunate to not only have a lot of the Abbott lieutenants, but a lot of the senior advisors for the Cruz campaign come on to support our campaign. So to me, there is, and I think if this comes down the pike, we're about to see in the next few days, weeks, this whole notion of navigators and people asking for your social security number and asking for all kinds of personal information, the risk of identity theft. I think there is a strong role for the Attorney General to protect Texans, as we have a bunch of folks either well-motivated or not to try and take a lot of information out of Texans and try to perhaps play on them to as people transition to this new Obamacare. So I think there will be a heightened role for the Attorney General to play. And again, this is another role where you've got to stand up for Texans. And if we have a federal government that's overreaching, like we've seen with the IRS, or like we've seen with the DOJ or the NSA, and this Obamacare, I think the Office of Attorney General will have a critical role to play in protecting Texans.
Reeve, there are a lot of problems with Obamacare. One of the biggest problems is that it consumes such a large percentage of the economy. And anytime you have a government entity controlling the delivery of one product or service, it's always flawed. We saw that in the Soviet Union when they had the control of all the parts of the economy. And if you wanted to buy a car, you got one kind of car, one color, one size, and not very good. So that's why we have to fight the implementation of Obamacare, because the government fails every time it tries to implement and control part of the economy. A lot of people talk about fighting the federal government, fighting Obama. I'm the only one who has on this stage. I've sued them 7 times, and we're winning. We don't do it because we want to be litigious. We do it because the policies that they're putting forward are not grounded in good science, and they would harm the Texas economy. We have won on the cross-state air pollution rule at all levels, including the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia. Now that case is going up to the Supreme Court on cert, and we'll have to argue it. And that case would have closed down some of our coal-fired power plants last summer, potentially harming our ability to keep the lights on in Texas. So it's one thing to talk about fighting Obama, it's another to do it. I'm such a fan of Ted Cruz's because he puts his money where his mouth is, and he's passionate and articulate and bright, and he's leading the charge against a policy that we all know is going to be bad, and educating us along the way as to why it is bad. So I'm certain that when I am Attorney General, there'll be many opportunities to fight the implementation of Obamacare, including perhaps some mandates from the Department of Justice telling us that we have to implement parts of it, at which point we'll have to push back and say no.
Senator Paxton, is there any...
Can I answer that question? I didn't
Yeah,
get the
yeah.
Obama. So I really appreciate what Ted Cruz did because I grew up in government health care. My father was in the Air Force, so I know what the results of that are. One, it's rationed. So whenever I had a cold that took a day to half a day that you had to wait, if you needed to see a specialist, it took sometimes weeks to get to where you needed to go. So I've experienced government health care, so I know what the results of this are, and that's why I appreciate his willingness to fight now, because if we don't stop it now, I mean, it's more likely to stay in place. I disagree with the commissioner on saying that he's the only one that's fought on this issue. Justice Roberts gave us a decision that many of us disagreed with, but he did give us a little piece of help, and he said that the states cannot be forced with a stick to expand Medicaid. They can be given a carrot, and so the carrot was offered. They offered us money to expand Medicaid, and that was something that me and many of my colleagues in the Senate spent hours looking over bills trying to find an expansion of Medicaid. And there were numerous bills where they were trying to expand Medicaid, and we either killed them in the Senate or we made them change the bill so that Medicaid would not be expanded. So that was just one place where we could fight. Now, it was quietly done. We weren't out advertising that we'd filed lawsuits, but we did it over and over. We spent our entire session going through those bills. This is a critical issue. I have no doubt that we'll be fighting this, that I'll be fighting this as the Attorney General. And we also have this whole issue. We did not adopt state healthcare exchanges. There was a huge push to adopt the Obama State Healthcare Exchange. We did not do that, potentially leaving us an out in the future. So I will be a part of doing whatever I can to aid Ted Cruz's fight against Obamacare.
Is there anything, is there such a thing as too much fighting the federal government? I think Attorney General Abbott has said he wakes up, goes to work, sues Obama, goes home, right? At some point, a big part of the office is to, go after deadbeat dads. I mean, is there a better way to spend
Here's what I would say. I would say that if we're talking about constitutional freedoms, and we're talking about the right of our state to govern itself, whether it's our own election law with voter ID, whether it's redistricting, whether it's the EPA infringing upon our business's ability to operate, whether it's oil and gas, coal, the fishing industry. I mean, those are fights worth having. If it costs, I think he spent $4 or $5 million fighting the federal government. We're talking about billions of dollars in revenue. We're talking about our freedoms. We're talking about our ability to govern ourselves and control our destiny. And if we give up that fight, it changes the course of the history of our state and our nation.
Reeve, it's not an either or. You got to walk and chew gum at the same time. The Attorney General's office has a $500 million a year budget, 4,200 employees. So we don't have to choose between child support and standing up for our rights. We have to do both, particularly when not standing could have extremely dangerous effects on our economy. This suite of greenhouse gas rulemakings, which we hope to get in front of the Supreme Court, would place a limit on CO2 emissions, requiring industries, automobile owners, small companies to have to acquire CO2 credits in order to operate. We don't believe that's grounded in the Clean Air Act. We think it's bad policy, and we think it's frankly designed to hurt the state of Texas. So you have to stand up against those, and we're winning on many fronts. It's a matter of prioritizing what the people in the AG's office are going to do, but there cannot be any higher priority than standing up for the rights of Texans. We all swear an oath to the state of Texas to stand for it and its citizens, and as a result, we've got this incredible economy here that is the envy of the rest of the country, with 1,200 people a day moving here. So we must be doing something right, and standing up for ourselves is part of that.
Chairman Branch, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I agree. There's multitasking involved, and of course, is the reasons I'm running. I mean, one is to stand up to a increasingly overreaching federal government. If the federal government is going to overreach in all the areas that we've talked about, well, then I think you have to, as the chief legal officer, you have to stand up, and you have to be tough. And these folks are not. They're pretty result oriented, and they take no prisoners sort of approach. So, to me, you have to be smart, competent, and it's helpful to have a record of actually being thoughtful and getting something done, pushing back. For example, I did that against when I first came to office, and pushed back against some activist judges who had said you can't even have a moment of silence in your public schools. Said that to the state of Alabama. We changed that in Texas, and now 5 million kids can have a moment of silent prayer and can say the Texas and U.S. pledge. So I have a record of getting things done, but it's not just the federal government. I mean, it's important we keep our open and transparent government here. I've done a lot of things to open up our state government. And the Office of Legal Counsel, there's 5 divisions in the Attorney General's office. The Office of Legal Counsel has within it Open Records Division. It's a really important area because you got the Public Information Act, and you've got making sure we have hold our meetings right. We passed some law. We're working with General Abbott this session on, making sure that even over the online, that we have ability to make sure we don't violate quorums and keep the record open. When I came to Austin, Reeve, you could pass a bill in the House and the Senate and not have a final a recorded vote. There was no accountability, and it could go to the governor, and then we could become law, affect millions of people, and no one would know whether or not there was an actual vote because it was voice votes were allowed. And working with the people of Texas, we passed a constitutional amendment that can't happen anymore. You've got to be accountable. So I think whether it's standing up to a federal government or making sure we have transparent government so citizens, with the consent of the governor and their public servants, can make sure we continue this Texas miracle. And that's, to me, the third point, which is preserving limited government, making sure we have appropriate regulations, not too much, not excessive. We're not a big government state. That's not our tradition. And so the Attorney General has to be the defender of limited government in Texas.
Well, going to a local issue now, I think one thing that sort of surprised me that became sort of a hot-button issue early in the campaign season was the non-discrimination ordinance in San Antonio. And I was, Chairman Branch, you wrote a letter to Mayor Castro opposing that. Do you worry at all? Polls show sort of the younger generation more increasingly comfortable with issues like gay marriage. Do you worry that the opposition to this puts you guys sort of could lose your party the support of future generations?
The issue there was, and I've gotten working with his brother when he was in the House on higher ed, and I've gotten to know Mayor Castro. I saw what was going on. Again, I have a record of standing up for First Amendment rights. This was the issue of returning prayer to the school in Texas. And so I saw what was going on. I read it, and it was unconstitutional. I mean, if you have a motivation to not discriminate against a certain group of folks, you can't solve that problem by then discriminating against another group of folks in Texas. And so, if people have a certain view about traditional marriage, then we can't have this sort of thought police stuff coming in, saying you can't have a city contract or you can't serve on a city board if you hold some sort of speech or a religious liberty position. And so I was glad to see they backed it up twice. I don't know that they backed it up far enough, but they at least adjusted it. And to me, the larger issue is an attorney general has got to protect Texans and has got to protect their constitutional rights. You take an oath. And so whether it's their First Amendment rights that the press cares about and that people of faith care about, speech we all care about, or whether it's the Second Amendment rights to bear arms or the Fourth Amendment. I mean, all these things are issues that are fundamentally important to Texans. And so whether it's the federal government or whether it's a state government or whether it's a municipal government, I'm going to stand up. If I'm the next Attorney General, if I earn the vote of the people, I'm going to stand up for Texans' constitutional rights.
Do you want to chime in?
Yes, I did an interview with the San Antonio paper. And not only is this ordinance a violation of my First Amendment rights, my ability to speak out and not be punished for expressing my point of view by being removed from a city board or not being able to do business with the city. You may disagree with my point of view, but I have the right to say it. It also may be a violation of my freedom of religion, as well as it's not grounded in the law. The Supreme Court has a series of cases that says which classes of people are suspect classes. It's race, national origin, and alienage. And that's because they have a history of being oppressed or a history of being discriminated against. That's what the civil rights movement was all about, to protect people of color so that they would not be discriminated against. In my judgment, this is not a civil rights issue, and by trying to elevate themselves to be on par with race, it's an inappropriate way to try to gain that particular privilege.
I was actually the first one out opposing this, and largely because this country was founded by people who came here for religious freedom and for freedom of speech. And this clearly violated that basic fundamental principle. And if those are the type of issues we just let go, that we don't stand up and say this isn't right, then we're going to lose our freedoms. We're going to lose the very freedoms that our founders, that the pilgrims, that others came over here to have. And this idea that you could be kicked off a city commission or a board, or that you could not contract with a city because you didn't have the right thoughts or the right beliefs or the right religious views, is wrong and unconstitutional. So, you know, I hope that that these type of things don't continue to come up, but I have no doubt that they will, and I plan on fighting them.
So if you were Attorney General, I mean, every major city in the state now has sort of a non-discrimination based on sexual orientation ordinance. Would you go after those?
Well, but they don't punish people for having different views. There's a difference. If you want to have those, you have them. That's your elected body. But you should not punish people for having different views and say they cannot serve and they cannot contract with the city. That's just wrong and unconstitutional.
In word or deed, I mean, it was sort of thought police stuff. I mean, as someone who got married in 1984, it was a little chilling to read some of that language. I mean, it was surprising to me, and they did adjust it pretty dramatically several times. I'm not sure they adjusted it enough, but.
Well, I think we're sort of winding down before we go to Q&A, but I was wondering we'll start with Commissioner Smitherman. What would you say to someone who said the difference here on stage are more style than substance? You guys are basically have more or less the same positions. It's just a matter. Is it just a matter of sort of how you hold yourselves, or are there actually substantive differences between the candidates?
Yeah, I think we have clear choices represented on the stage, Reeve. I have a history of leadership, of conservative leadership and accomplishment. At the Railroad Commission, we are issuing more oil and gas drilling permits now than we've done since 1985. We're leading America on the road to energy independence. This was a goal of mine when I ran for that office. We're also doing it with less money. And everyone generally recognizes that the Railroad Commission is operating as a well-oiled machine today. Same with the PUC. When I got there, electricity rates were above average in Texas, above the national average. Today, they're very low. In fact, that is one of the reasons why our economy is doing so well. We reduced the number of employees that we had. We increased customer satisfaction. We turned back over $100 million to the legislature in unexpended appropriation. And I've also been a prosecutor in the Harris County DA's office, so I know my way around a courtroom. When these guys were freshman legislators, I was putting bad people in jail in Houston. That's the kind of experience that you need in the next Attorney General. It's not a voting job. The Attorney General is not a policy maker. It's a law enforcement policy implementer. And I'm the person who's running for that office that has that unique experience. If you want somebody who's got a record of voting, that's not me. I have a record of leadership and accomplishment, and I think that's what the Attorney General's office needs a person who's already fighting Obama, has been fighting Obama as chairman of the PUC and the Railroad Commission, doesn't need any on-the-job training, is ready to continue on day one.
Senator Paxton?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that, as I said earlier, it really, I've got 22 years of legal experience, not in government, outside of government. So I've got the legal experience, but I've also, this record that he was diminishing is important because there are thousands of decisions that I've made on all types of issues. And it's challenging to get the right answers on every one of those issues, but I think if you look at that record, there is a record of leadership. It's not just like we sit and push a button. There's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of connecting. There's a lot of connecting with other legislators. There's a lot of connecting with constituents. And what I would say is, if you want proof that somebody's going to have a conservative framework in this particular position, you've got an 11-year consistent record. And talk about leadership. I mean, what Ted Cruz has done, I've had opportunities to do the same thing. I understand what he's going through because currently he's struggling with his own party. They're upset with him. There are lots of senators really upset with him. I've been there because I felt like there were times on taxes, on budget, on leadership issues that I needed to stand apart and say, look, this is not right. We are not heading in the right direction. That's leadership. And I have a 11-year record of doing that.
Chairman Branch?
Yeah, I've practiced law for 3 decades, as I said, in a large setting, complex transactions, complex litigation, been involved, seen a full-service law firm. The Office of Attorney General is a big law firm. I'm in one of the biggest firms in the state. I've also gone down and started my own firm from scratch. I know what a small business experience is like. I haven't been sort of part-time and done title or other business ventures. I haven't been an investment banker most of my life. I have been a lawyer, and that's what the job calls for. And I also have been in the legislature as a citizen legislature, and I've had a record of accomplishment. I've stood up to my own party when people didn't want to have recorded votes on final passage of bills. And I've also stood up to the federal government, to activist judges, and actually gotten things done. I've picked up balls which other people couldn't get done in the education sphere and got them across the goal line, some helping this university right here. And so I have a record of getting things done as a conservative, and I'm fortunate to have the lieutenants of Greg Abbott and the senior legal team of Senator Cruz, and 4 justices of the Supreme Court who know a little bit about the law, and a former U.S. Attorney General who knows a little bit about being an Attorney General, and a former Chief Justice. All support our message and our candidacy, which tells me that we're doing something right, and I hope we can earn the support like we have of those folks, of the voters.